Last Friday delivered a huge job number, so big in fact, that it sent stocks soaring on hopes of that fabled soft landing, the Hail Mary that will save Joe Biden from himself. Sadly, there were so many devils in those details that it won't be saving anybody from Joe Biden. Charles Payne summed it best, tweeting out that the jobs report was, quote, one-third poorly paid waitresses, one-third poorly paid nurses, and one-third government jobs. Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln. The report's headline numbers were big. September non-farm payrolls leapt 336,000, which was almost double what Wall Street expected. The unemployment rate got worse, but at 3.8% is still historically low. So that's the good news. Now the bad news. For starters, just 86,000 of those jobs were full-time. Going by the employment survey, the rest were part-time. In fact, many of them were second jobs, which currently make up almost 40% of new jobs. Over the past 3 months, full-time employment has actually dropped in the United States by almost 700,000, while part-time jobs are up 1.2 million. In other words, people are taking second jobs to make ends meet, and that gets counted as record job growth. At this point, over 8 million Americans hold multiple jobs because they need the money. Almost 500,000 Americans now have 2 full-time jobs. So many jobs, you gotta take 2. By the way, the last 3 times full-time employment fell that hard was 2001, which was right before the dot-com recession, then again in 2008, which was just before the global financial crisis, and then 2020, when governments bought us in instant depression. So spot the pattern. Beyond that night shift miracle, the other shoe to drop was people who aren't working. Workers who are either unemployed or out of the workforce took another flying leap. In just the past 2 months, unemployed Americans are up over 500,000, which is almost 10%. Meanwhile, between 4.5 and 5.5 million Americans remain out of the workforce. That's 3.5 years after the pandemic. My colleague E.J. Antoni worked out what the unemployment rate would be if we included those so-called discouraged workers who have given up. And it comes to an unemployment rate of around 6.5%, 6.3 to 6.8. which is right in line with previous recessions, given that companies hoard workers in the early days. Finally, job composition. In the last employment report, I characterized the new jobs as government workers and DoorDash, and this month kept it up. Fully 22% of the new jobs were government workers, who are, of course, parasites who collect a paycheck to crush the rest of the economy. The rest of growth was almost entirely from services, especially government-related services like education and healthcare. The actual productive economy naturally shrank. Manufacturing was down once again, while professional and business services, trade, and transportation all shrank. So what's next? Brought to you by Unchained. What's next is we are seeing surprisingly bad jobs numbers to be so early in a recession. So going by history, it will get a lot worse. And keep in mind, we don't know what happens in a coordinated global recession with 33 trillion in debt, paying over $1 trillion in interest, along with a potential oil price explosion on the horizon. They do not have a script for this, but they'll keep pushing until it breaks, so the rest of us get to pick up the pieces. Okay, we'll be watching. See you next time.